it's Sierra Proctor from SierraProctor.com. Thank you so much for checking out this video. And if you haven't already done so, make sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel. And after you finish watching this video, go ahead and head over to SierraProctor.com and put yourself on the mailing list so that you can be informed of all our new content and series that we're going to be putting out. So today is very exciting because we're going to start a series discussing how to start your business, where to begin and where to end. So this is going to be a 4-part video series, and please feel free to leave me a comment down below and let me know your thoughts on the format of this video, because this is how the formatting is going to be for all of the videos in this series. And if you like it, then we'll continue it with our next series. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it.
Okay, y'all, so let's go ahead and get started at step number 1. Step number 1 is all about generating and qualifying your ideas. So typically when we talk about generating ideas, we're going to do some sort of brainstorming activity, and then we kind of move on to qualifying ideas. So for me, one of the techniques that I use is design thinking, and it incorporates a little bit of both sides of both generating and qualifying your idea. So we're going to get to that in a little bit, but let's go ahead and talk about brainstorming. For our purposes, we're going to define brainstorming as a method used to produce ideas to solve a problem, create convenience, or provide value. Now, the reason that I define brainstorming in this way is because we want to create ideas that have value. Why would we want to create some idea that really doesn't provide anything to our customer or to our consumer? And I firmly believe that the best companies out there do all 3 of those things. They solve a problem, they create convenience, and they provide value. So, for example, let's take Amazon as an example. So they solved a problem for us. They made shopping online convenient. They did it all in one place, right? So instead of us having to go to a whole bunch of different areas and pay for shipping multiple times over, they found a way to bundle all of those services together. So not only are they solving a problem, but they created convenience by doing so. They also provide value to us because we're paying them a small fee to have this convenience. So I know for a lot of us, that's very valuable to be able to go online and get everything that we need all in one spot. It's like the one-stop shop that you don't even have to leave your house for. So extremely, extremely, extremely good example of what a company should be doing. So let's go ahead and move on to some of the techniques that you can use for brainstorming. So the first one that we have is mind mapping. The second one is rapid ideation. And the third one is round robin brainstorming. So with mind mapping, that's pretty much actually creating a visual diagram that helps you generate related ideas from a single concept. So we'll start off with something like an apple, right? And then we'll create different branches that give you secondary thoughts of when you think about an apple, what comes to mind, right? So maybe you're thinking, okay, a tree, a knife, seeds, right? You see where I'm going with that? And then from there, those secondary ideas that you come up with, you'll branch off from there. So you're creating somewhat of a hierarchy of ideas, right? So it's really great for showing the relationship between all of the items and their level of importance. But I will say about mind mapping, it can become a little bit overwhelming if you do not have a good narrowed down central concept to work with. So for example, with something like apples, there's like a million different ways you could go with apple, and then it can be kind of confusing. So I'd say make sure that you have something narrowed down before you do mind mapping. Now with rapid ideation, this is something that I think is really great for teams. What you can do is have a timer set, so maybe about 2 or 3 minutes, right? And you'll get some sticky notes. And in that 2 to 3 minutes, you're going to write down every single idea that comes to your mind. And I mean every single idea. No matter how outlandish, how crazy, how absurd they seem, write it down on that sticky note and post it on a wall. Then when you finish that time, your entire team, or just you yourself, if you're doing this by yourself, can look over every single thing that you thought of and qualify those ideas afterwards. Or you can scale back the ones that seem interesting or maybe too outlandish to actually be feasible as a business idea. You can scale them back to make them something that is viable for your company. Now, round robin, this is something that you absolutely would have to do with a team. So I would say that this works better with larger groups. I've done this with larger groups of about 5 to 10 people, but I'm sure it can work for smaller groups. It just depends on how you have it set up. So with round robin, what you want to do is actually have your team circle up into a group, and you're going to give every single person the opportunity to say something and provide an idea to the group, and no one else can comment while they're giving their idea to the group, right? So we also want to make sure that we have a note taker during this activity. So designate someone in that group to write down the ideas as they come out, so that after the activity is over, you all can go back and reflect and try to refine those ideas, possibly take a vote and see which ones you want to continue with, eliminate the ones that you don't. And that is a great exercise. And one thing that I did was have like an object that I could pass around so everyone knew who the speaker was, and if you didn't have that object, you could not speak. So just a really great way to keep that whole activity under control and make sure that it's going the way that you would like it to go and it's very organized. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. The next step is design thinking, and design thinking, if you aren't familiar, is a process used to solve problems critically and creatively. And design thinking is extremely important to me because I actually do this with all of my different businesses, and I think it helps you become a customer-centric business rather than just focusing on your business as a money-making tool. So I think that this also does a great job at bridging the idea generation and qualifying your idea all into one cohesive step-by-step plan, which makes it extremely easy for you to see where you're going wrong or where you can tweak your plan, your product, or your service to make sure that it's truly answering and fulfilling the needs of your customers. So as I already said, the design thinking process is a step-by-step plan, and it is very formal. So let's talk about it. We have the steps: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Okay? So empathize. You want to make sure that you are in touch with your customers or your potential customers, right? So you're thinking about how that person might feel, what their day-to-day is like, what problems they may have, right? Those are all things that you want to be extremely in touch with your customers so that you can make sure that you're tailoring your product, your service, and your experience to exactly what they will like and what they will identify with. Because when you can identify with your customers at a stronger and higher level, they're definitely more attracted to your company as opposed to one who is not really meeting those needs, right? So next, let's define the problem. What exactly is the problem that you are going to solve for them, right? So this should be a one-liner. The problem that I am going to solve is blank, okay? So let's say the problem that I'm going to solve is cutting apples easily and quickly in the morning, okay? So then from there, you start to ideate. You start to come up with different ideas that will solve that problem, right? So that's kind of like the brainstorming piece right there. Ideate. You're going to come up with as many ideas as you can to solve this problem, okay? And make sure that it's solving the problem, right? So that's where you can use some of those brainstorming techniques that I mentioned prior to this. So after you do that, you're going to start prototyping, right? So let's say that you come up with a machine that's going to cut the apple. You just put the apple in and it's going to cut it and it's going to come out with no seeds, no core, and it's going to be perfectly sliced, right? So now you got to figure out how you're going to build that, okay? You need to start prototyping. You may have different colors. You may have different blades, different settings, different speeds, right? That's where you want to prototype that design. And you can do this with service-based companies as well, but it would have a little bit of a different prototyping process, okay? And so once we finish that prototype, we want to test it, right? So you may want to test it with your consumer groups. So you might do a survey, perhaps. Perhaps you'll do a clinical trial. It really just depends on whatever you're doing, but you'll figure out some way to test it to make sure that it's meeting the needs of the group that you're targeting, and that it answers the problem that you defined in step 2, okay? So now let's backtrack a little bit and talk about market research. For some people, the design thinking process might be a little too on the nose or difficult for them to actually do or understand. So if you can't do that, I would say the next best thing to do is do your market research extremely well. Now, the market research does play a role in the design thinking process, in the empathize and define steps of the process, but market research is kind of its own separate thing, and it's also going to be tied back in when you actually go to create your business plan, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So market research is when you gather information about people and companies' needs, wants, and preferences, right? So that's empathizing with your customers or your consumers. So the market research is extremely important, because if you don't know what your customers want, or you don't know where there's a need in the marketplace for your product or your service, then your business will probably not be successful, because you're not in touch with what needs to be done. And if you only focus on what you think needs to be done, you'll miss the target. Absolutely. So make sure that you are paying very, very close attention to what the market is telling you. The market will dictate everything about your business. Everything. What you do, the prices that you charge, the way that your customer service is centered. All of those things you can find through market research. And market research is not only limited to just researching your customers. It's also about researching your competitors, which is also very important, because if you want to be competitive in a certain niche market, you need to be aware of what your competitors are doing, how they're consistently evolving, and how they're upgrading their products and services so that you can keep up and not be outpaced by their growth. So now the two different types of market research that you're going to want to do is primary research and secondary research. Primary research is collected by you, right? And secondary research is collected by someone else. So you're going to be examining the information that someone else has already collected for you on your market or industry, okay? So let's talk about primary research first. Some of the techniques that we will use to collect primary research are surveys, focus groups, observations, and interviews. And some of these things can be costly. So if you are a startup and you don't have a lot of money to pour into your market research, and you actually need that money to actually generate your products and your services, I would say that you may want to look at observations and interviews, right? You can find a lot of people that will just do interviews, and you can observe people for free, right? So you just have to be strategic about how you go about getting that information and make sure that you're not invading people's privacy. As far as surveys and focus groups, those can be kind of pricey, but there are different ways that you can do these things at a discounted price. So with surveys, the only thing with surveys is that you need to think about where you're getting your leads from, because if the leads are not consistent with the customers that you'll get, you will not get accurate information. With focus groups, those can be costly, because a lot of times focus groups do want to be, the participants themselves want to be paid, and there are companies that can do coordinate focus groups for you, and those will also have a fee associated with them. Okay, so that's where we look to secondary research. Now, this is really important and excellent for startup companies. However, secondary research, because it is collected by someone else, everything that you see needs to be taken with a grain of salt, right? Especially things that you see from your competitors. If your competitors are putting out articles that saying, oh, we're making X amount and this is $1 billion industry, blah, blah, blah. You need to understand that they may have an agenda, right? They have an agenda. Why are they wanting to put this information out? What is this going to do? It may serve to hype up their investors, right? So if their investors see, oh, the industry's growing, the industry is booming. Oh, they made X amount of money last year, and this many customers were available to us, and this was our acquisition. Like, all of those things are going to make the investors feel like, okay, they're doing really good, right? So I'm going to invest more money. But in reality, the market may not be doing so good. Now, there are regulations on these types of things, but again, be very careful about where you are getting your information from. Make sure that it is accurate. Now, you can also get information from industry associations, trade groups, and trade journals. Those ones are excellent, right? Because they're doing an analysis of an industry or a trade group overall, as opposed to just one company that's operating within that industry or within that trade group, okay? And then you can look at some market reports. Those are also good. Same kind of idea as the industry and trade groups, okay?
All right, thank y'all so much for watching until the end of the video. I hope you all really enjoyed this content, and make sure that you turn on your post notifications so that you know when the next video in this series drops, okay? Next time we are going to discuss how to create your business plan and how to find funding for your business. So until next time, bye.